In this video, we're going to just have a return really to the idea of the ground rules for talk in breakout rooms, because we think it's so important that this becomes embedded or is at least referred to if you're just doing it as a one-off with the groups that are going into your breakout rooms. What we're interested in here is the idea that genuine questions that actually don't have an established answer and for which everybody can make a contribution are really good ways of getting people engaged in dialogue. There's nothing to lose, there's nothing to boast about, it's simply that it's a genuine exchange of ideas to construct an understanding that we might not have had before. And so consequently, when we're doing this one, we're looking at a question which opens up to a range of people who have a different range of perspectives, all of which are equally valued and valid. So what we're going to do is pretend for a moment that this is a breakout room, as there are a few of us here, so it may as well be. And we're going to ask Nicola to lead us with the kind of question which might just open up a genuine conversation and in which we can use those ideas of building on people's ideas, asking for reasons, asking for justifications, and so
on. So the question that I'd like to get your different perspectives on is, why bring children to a museum? And in answering that, I'd invite you to draw on your own previous experiences, perhaps as a child being taken to a museum, or possibly as a parent, or as somebody who might have been helping on a school trip, has been part of experiencing museums with children that way, or as somebody who doesn't have experience of this yet but has an interest in it. So the question is, why bring children to a museum? Does anyone have a view on why we would do that? Amelia?
I'd say like one of the things to me that's sort of a bit of a standout is sort of the vicarious experience that it offers. It's like a real standout experience to children. You can say, remember when we went and did this? So sort of being out of the classroom, like learning in a new environment, it's exciting. You get to see like the different personalities of the children, and they sort of are learning in a new way that they don't feel is sort of classroom sat behind a desk. It's a very hands-on learning experience. So I think that's sort of one sort of positive you can take from it.
Okay, so it's one benefit might be the difference that you get. So it's not about replicating the experience in a classroom, but something totally different, and the different responses that you'd get from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo that really in that I've taken children to museums in the past and worked with museum educators in those museums, and that sense of being somewhere different, very, very important. And the sense of this person in front of me is an expert working with real things. We're looking at the real thing here. We're not looking at a picture of Ramesses sarcophagus cover. We're looking at it, and it has these objects have seem to be imbued with more meaning when you're looking at the real thing than they are even if you're looking at a replica. And children seem to, in particular, but I know adults as well, seem to pick up on that this is just, the number of wow, look at that moments is so I'd certainly agree with Amelia that it's that sense of difference, but part of the sense of difference is absolutely fundamentally about the real objects that they're suddenly put in front of you. I would say, really.
I think it's that sort of authenticity of experience, isn't it, that you're looking at something that was actually made by real people sort of 3,000 years ago in ancient Egypt. I think building on what Paul and Amelia have said, also the idea of being in a different place allows you to be a different kind of learner. So the kind of conversations and the kind of experiences you have enable children to express themselves and be themselves in a different way to in a classroom or even at home.
And
And also, I think the different range of objects that you have in the museum, I think that because you're walking through and seeing things that you wouldn't necessarily see in everyday life or choose to see, you can be exposed to things and become interested in things that you might never have realized that you could be interested in because you're seeing it in that different context.
Do you ever have, sorry. Do you ever have the situation where people don't believe that they're the real objects? Because that's quite. I've had that with children in the past, where they said, "Well, that can't possibly be real. You're just making that up. That it's not." And I wondered whether you ever had that happening with the objects.
That does happen sometimes. I think people have an idea that if something is old, it must be falling to pieces, or it must be very damaged. And sometimes if something's in very good condition, people find it hard to believe that it's old.
Yeah.
So that sometimes, people find that hard to deal with. But also in some museums around the world, the convention is to keep the real things safely and display replicas. Sometimes people's past experience of a museum might be what makes them think the objects are not real.
Yeah.
But we do a lot of work with children to explain this is the real thing, and we're trusting you and we're trusting all our other visitors with it. We think it's important that you have that connection that a lot of you have referred to.
That's another point that I was just thinking of, sort of the social aspect of taking them to a museum, whether it be a museum or any trip. It's sort of teaching them the sort of responsibility of themselves to look after sort of items in the museum and how to approach like museum staff to ask questions and things, as opposed to sort of that maybe like some more safety barrier in school, like even like maybe getting on a coach or walking there. Do you know what I mean? The other social aspects that come with it alongside the more academic learning side in the museum, like everything else around it, I think is quite important.
Well, we can't hear you, Nicola.
Sorry. I think it's very important that the visit to the museum is a holistic experience. So the planning, the journey, what happens apart from the direct learning from the objects, but you're also learning from all the other museum visitors who are there. Maybe there'll be another school group who organise things slightly differently to you. And I think all those are really valuable learning points that come from museum visits too. Yeah, I agree.
But to be slightly controversial, when I've been on such visits in the past, I've seen the evident learning from what's been happening, but when you were overhearing the children talking about what happened, the shop features very heavily, the lunchtime features very heavily, and so on, and so there is a slight challenge there, isn't there? That you're almost you're introducing people to learning in a real context, but they're so carried away with the event. Of going out of, particularly with children, going out of school for the day, that actually that learning might be secondary. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, really.
Because as teachers, we always want to meet children where they are and value the things that they value, and show that we know that the shop is really exciting and people having a different lunch. Those things are important. But I think it's the role of teachers is to kind of alongside that say, okay, remember we came here to learn these, about this particular kind of artwork or historical period, and weave that in so that the children can see that it's not something totally removed from real life experience. There's a reason that people want to have this new knowledge. And build on it in the other lessons that are going on in school, so that it becomes interwoven, and all these different ways of learning can work together, I think.
Sorry, Amaris, I think I cut across you there.
No, that's quite all right. I was just going to say it kind of links back to what you were saying, actually, as well as what Nicola was saying in terms of it being such a different space that they go into, but also remembering that they often I think, remember kind of the awe of going into a building that's usually much bigger than most buildings that they go into and quite ornate in and of itself. And so just to be surrounded by the things in that space, I think sometimes also can not interfere with, but is something that they remember as much as the different objects, but that experience and the awe of the building itself. Excuse me.
Maybe there's an argument to be had here for making sure that they have more than one museum experience during their time at primary school, so that they build on the awe and wonder of their first visit, but then become more and more familiar with the spaces and the places within the museum, so that they can get down to the learning as well.
And perhaps even pre-preparation, showing them the space and letting them experience it virtually before you go in.
There is some research that shows actually that makes a difference to the quality of learning if you do that pre-visit preparation with children before they come to the museum. They are more ready to do the learning.
I guess it could also, though, then encourage them to go home and want to explore more museums, like with their families, and encourage them, like in the holidays, to even if they're not going to a museum as such, but looking at things differently, like even in the environment. So it could, encourage things like that.
So I think if we've done nothing else in this little video, we've made a good case for museum education.
Bringing children to museums.
Brilliant.